You're listening to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, a podcast for professionals responsible for the safety and well-being of their employees. Each episode features an interview with a leader in employee safety to discuss how to protect your employees from a wide array of threats, from severe weather to a global pandemic. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the Employee Safety Podcast. I'm Peter Steinfeld. Today's episode is a little different than usual, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Alert Media recently commissioned a survey of American workers from a wide range of industries to uncover how they genuinely feel about the safety of their workplaces and the values of their employers when it comes to their safety. We then analyzed these results to create Alert Media's inaugural State of Employee Safety Report, and they are truly eye-opening. I invited Danielle Sherman, Vice President of Communications at research firm Material, to the show to help break down the survey results and discuss what this new data means for organizations. She highlights how important safety is to all employee groups and why their perception of safety can have a significant impact on overall job satisfaction and loyalty. There's a lot to unpack from the research, so let's jump in. Danielle, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the why behind all of this. In your opinion, why is this type of research important and why now?
I'm sure we can all agree that employee safety is incredibly important and should be top of mind for any organization. There have been many reports on this topic, especially since the pandemic, but usually the employee perspective is missing from the conversation. I think it's great that Alert Media wanted to ask employees directly how they feel about the safety of their workplace and how they think their employers value employee safety. I also think we need data that's more inclusive demographically. Other reports have analyzed workforce trends that are specific to a particular industry or are related to a specific incident, such as the pandemic. But today's workforce is very different than it was pre-pandemic. So it's good to cast a wide net and survey a larger range of employees. This gives us an accurate reflection of current employee perceptions across generations and even across different employee groups, not just industries. And the last point I want to make here is that I think it's smart for Alert Media to want to uncover data that is applicable to any organization, no matter the size, the industry, the location. This way, more organizations can use it to their advantage.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with the great resignation, labor shortages, and the difficulties some companies have had basically attracting and retaining talent recently, it seems like employee safety is just more important than ever. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. I am excited to share some of the survey data throughout our discussion today. But at a high level, Peter, I could tell you that 4 in 5 working Americans are more concerned about their health and well-being than ever before, and their safety is certainly a priority across the board. And this means that their expectations for safety in the workplace are even greater. And it's truly on employers to really meet these increased demands and really meet their employees where they are.
Well, what was your methodology for conducting the survey, just to give our listeners some context?
Sure. So we conducted an online study among a couple of thousand full-time employed Americans, which included a broad and representative cross-section of full-time employees, which included both those in senior level positions and those early in their careers. We also designed the study to reach a diverse and representative mix of key demographics, which includes gender, age, geographic region, and race and ethnicity, to really ensure that the results are an accurate snapshot of what the American workforce looks like today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and dive into some of the results. Generally, how important is safety to employees?
As I mentioned at the top, safety is a priority to all working Americans. About 3 in 4 place extreme importance on feeling safe where they live, where they send their kids to school, where they receive medical treatment, and where they work is no exception. In fact, 73% of our survey respondents report that safety where they work is extremely important. What's more is that 9 in 10 working Americans feel that it's more important than ever for their employer to create that safe workplace. And shockingly, when we really uncovered how those who were exclusively working from home during the pandemic actually felt when they returned to work, 7 in 10 report they didn't feel extremely safe. So it's a perfect time for us to be having this conversation.
And it's really interesting. It makes me think, like, have people always felt this way and nobody ever interviewed them, or employers just didn't care to ask? Or are people really changing their perceptions about safety? I really wonder that.
I think based on our survey results, it's probably a mixture of all three, right? The pandemic and the recent landscape has certainly maybe given a little bit more of a heightened attention to the topic of safety more generally. And I think, as I mentioned at the start, what was always missing from the conversation was that employee perspective. And that's exactly what we're able to bring in the research that we did here, was truly get that firsthand perspective from employees around just the role that safety is playing in their lives and their expectations for that when they're out there working, whether that's from home, remote, at the office, or traveling. We're going to dig into that all in just a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What did the survey results say about the impact that employees' perception of safety at work has on their overall job satisfaction and loyalty to their employers?
Well, to give this some context, a lack of communication in emergency situations could be absolutely detrimental to retention. Our respondents report that if their employer did not alert them in the event of an emergency or a disaster, 1 in 2 would seriously question whether their employer had their best interests at heart.
Wow.
And admit that they'd feel unsafe at work. 1 in 3 admit they wouldn't even be able to trust their employer anymore. We see that 2 in 5 would even question whether they want to stay with their employer. On the flip side, a genuine care about the safety of employees holds the same weight as compensation and benefits, which are 2 traditional motivators to stay at any job. Specifically, 1 in 2 working Americans would be motivated to stay with their employer if they felt like their employer really cared about employee safety. This is the same as those who would remain if they were given competitive compensation or comprehensive benefits. So let that sink in, right? Safety is just as much of a reason to stay with an employer as money and benefits. Huge, huge stat.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I just like to remind people listening that through this, you interviewed people across all sorts of jobs, not just those that are high risk or, someone working in construction where the job could get unsafe real quick. These are folks even in just general office jobs, right?
Absolutely. This is a cross section of what the real American workforce looks like today. So it spans industry, it spans type of work, it spans different levels. So your most senior to your most junior. And what I really found super interesting is that 1 in 3 report that they would be motivated to remain with their employer for the long term if they felt like their employer cared more about their safety, cared more about employee safety than revenue or profits.
Wow.
So the expectations are really high here.
Yeah. Well, getting into some of the things that people face, some of the different emergencies, I know you did ask employees about the different types of emergencies and disasters out there that they could face. So can you speak to what types of incidents employees are most concerned about experiencing in the workplace? What really stood out to you?
So there's plenty that working Americans are concerned about happening at their place of work today. At a very high level, we saw that a majority are worried that they'll encounter cyber attacks or some type of cyber crime. Severe weather crime, significant power outages or internet outages, natural disasters, and workplace violence definitely made the list. I think what stood out the most to me, and probably a really great reminder to employers, is that While 4 in 5 report that they're worried that they'll encounter another public health emergency, the same number, that 4 in 5, are more concerned about encountering one other type of emergency or disaster occurring at work than being exposed to COVID-19. So while the primary focus has likely been on safety surrounding COVID in terms of getting folks safely back into offices or helping employees to continue feeling safe, whatever their workplace might be, it is not the primary concern for employees currently. So again, a super good reminder that there is a lot more that is occupying the minds of these employees than just COVID-19.
Yeah, it's so hard to remember that when we're, as a world and a society, consumed with one situation. So that's really good advice. On the flip side, what situations are they least concerned about experiencing, or perhaps do they feel most prepared for and therefore not so worried about?
Across the board, scenarios like structure fires or disruptions to infrastructure really didn't rank as much of a concern or worry as some of the other emergencies or disasters that we saw coming in, like crime and workplace violence. And in this same vein, our research revealed that working Americans were more confident that their employer had prepared them to navigate scenarios like fires and like public health emergencies outside of COVID.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It really does. It seems like if you drill for something, you reduce the fear about it because people then feel that they have some control and they know what to do. So they should be less concerned about events they feel more prepared for. So with that in mind, how satisfied are employees with their organization's efforts to keep them safe across a wide variety of situations?
In a nutshell, working Americans are not satisfied. To really set the stage, I think it's important to note that 9 in 10 believe employers have a duty of care. That's a moral and legal obligation to protect employees from the unnecessary risk of harm while working or traveling on their behalf. And 4 in 5 believe that this responsibility to keep them safe extends to those working remotely as well. But when we start to boil it down, only 1 in 2 believe that safety is extremely important to their employer. Only 1 in 2. So here are some big numbers to consider. 1 in 2 feel their employer has made more of an effort to ensure their safety than in previous years. And this is at a time when safety is more important than ever. So that means half feel that their employer has not made more of an effort. 3 in 5 of those who are aware of what their employer is doing or has done to keep them safe are reporting that their expectations were only just met, if they were at all. So no going above and beyond here. And perhaps even more troubling to me is that 57% feel that it would take an emergency happening at work for their employer to truly care about employee safety.
Yikes.
And a significant majority of working Americans aren't confident that their employer has even given them the tools they need to navigate emergencies or disasters that they're actually worried about. So many are feeling ill-equipped to see their way through these situations, like the natural disasters, the protests and demonstrations, the crime, the workplace violence. So it's really showing that there's just a lot of room for improvement.
I wonder if it's that the employers don't really care or that they're just failing to communicate. So when you think about communication, and I know you mentioned this earlier, but is it meeting employee expectations? I'm thinking maybe that could be part of the problem here.
You are spot on, Peter. Communication surrounding safety is also falling short. Nearly 2 in 3 working Americans report that they are not extremely satisfied with the level of communication their employer has provided around what they're doing to keep employees safe. In fact, 2 in 3 agree that their employer's style of communication even needs work. We also looked at COVID more specifically, just again, given the landscape that we are in, And when we do this, we see that 1 in 2 are also not extremely satisfied with their employer's level of communication around maintaining a safe work environment in the wake of the pandemic. Maybe even a more sobering takeaway is that many believe their employer would either be slow to alert employees or they wouldn't even alert them at all if the very disasters or emergencies that they're worried about actually happened. And a majority do report that, yes, their employer does offer safety trainings or drills, but they are happening maybe way less frequently than employees might like. In fact, 1 in 3 say they are offered only once a year or less often. And 19% say that the trainings are not mandatory. So to me, this is really, creating potentially quite significant missed opportunities for employers to be able to really communicate all the things that they are doing to ready their employees in the wake of these emergencies.
Yeah, it almost seems like safety needs to be managed like a product where it needs to be formally managed. It needs to be marketed. There needs to be communication about it. Otherwise, people just kind of take it for granted or ignore it.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And again, based on what the research shows, there is clearly some sort of disconnect. It's not necessarily that the employer is not doing something to really, think about employee safety and put that at the forefront. But if they are, it is not being communicated in that way. It's not reading that way to employees.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of work to be done to really raise the bar on what safety looks like in today's workplace.
Yeah. Well, what do employees think their employers could do better regarding physical safety, communication, or just overall concern for employee well-being?
Well, that's the promising piece of all this, right? That there are improvements that can be made to help employees feel that their safety is important to their employer. Specifically, more than 8 in 10 working Americans do think there's at least one thing their employer can do to show that employee safety is a priority. Among these folks, about half feel it's about the communication frequency and the content. They believe their employer could communicate more often, as well as improve their communication about safety plans and policies. Others report that their employer could be more transparent about workplace incidents that do occur. They could offer more safety drills and rehearsals. They could provide access to more or better safety equipment. So again, these are just some of the things that employees point to that if their employer stepped up and was able to tackle some of these head on, they would definitely feel like safety is that much more important.
And it seems like it's somewhat low-hanging fruit. Like not a lot of this would require a tremendous amount of additional effort. It's just about explaining the why, showing people what you're doing, and then communicating about it.
100%.
Well, what did you personally find the most surprising about the survey results?
I think when we set out to field the research, I personally had the mistaken belief that most employees would actually rate their employer's commitment to safety fairly high, just given the type of response we saw from so many employers surrounding COVID and all the new safety guidelines and protocols that had to be put in place. But as I mentioned, and as we discussed, the research actually shows that the whole being exposed to COVID thing is almost a mere blip on employees' radar compared to all of the other emergencies or disaster scenarios that they worry about. And I'll admit, I was also a bit surprised, but maybe also happy to see the extent to which their employer's concern for employee safety could influence whether employees would remain in their current job and influence it to the same degree as compensation and benefits. It truly shows the importance that safety plays in today's new landscape.
Yeah, that is really fascinating, and I think it'll be important for employers to hear that, because I don't think they really fundamentally know that how important that is to people, and it really goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people don't feel safe, then everything else doesn't matter.
Yes, I definitely agree. And it's that sort of adage where all the money in the world might not be able to keep someone, and I think that this definitely proves that. Again, we are putting a priority on our own safety, and we have higher expectations than ever for our employers to really put that at the forefront of everything that they are doing.
Yeah. Well, I know you collected a tremendous amount of data. So to wrap up, how do you think the findings from this report can actually help organizations better protect their people?
Well, I think there's many key takeaways in the report. So I do encourage the listeners to read it in its entirety. But employers can start by using it to build a business case for improving employee safety. They could also use it to gain leadership buy-in on reinventing their company's safety culture. They could also help organizations prevent turnover and retain employees, which is another huge one. I think companies can use this information to measure and analyze their current crisis communication efforts to determine if they even have an effective communication plan and messaging in place. Similarly, the results can help companies figure out if they have the right communication tools or solutions to support their crisis communication efforts. And I think, as you know better than anyone, Peter, those tools should ensure that communications reach all employees, whether they are in office, at another company location, working remotely, or traveling for work. I think this is very important. Another idea is to use this data to justify spending more time and more resources on safety trainings, drills, and exercises to help employees feel more prepared. And finally, I think companies could use this information to really empower their employees to take an active role in their own safety, solicit their feedback, ask them for suggestions on training or exercises, really find out what's working for them and what's not in terms of preparedness. And I genuinely believe that this research is industry leading and that organizations will find it incredibly useful and applicable. So again, definitely urge the listeners to go ahead and download the full employee safety report to really see the full range of really meaningful insights that we uncovered.
Absolutely. Well, Danielle, fascinating stuff. Thanks for being on the show today. It is so valuable to get the employee perspective, which has been hidden for so long. And you did a wonderful job explaining their sentiments and expectations.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed my time with you, Peter, and I look forward to seeing these results in action.
Indeed, indeed. Well, if anyone would like to know more about your organization or connect with you directly, how can they do that?
Sure, they could reach out to me directly by email at danielle.sherman@materialplus.io.
Excellent. And if any of our listeners want to view the full employee safety report, it can be downloaded at alertmedia.com. Well, thanks again to Danielle and all our listeners for joining us on the Employee Safety Podcast. If you like what you heard, I encourage you to subscribe to future episodes at Alert Media's website or on your favorite podcast player. We would also appreciate you giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Have a safe week, everyone.
Alert Media is changing the way your leaders and response teams connect and communicate effectively when seconds matter. We provide our customers with a comprehensive solution for monitoring threats around the world and deploying fast, effective emergency communication. You need a panic-proof solution for high-stakes moments. In just a few clicks, your team can send a multi-channel notification to an impacted group of people and confirm their safety immediately. When employee safety is at stake, don't just communicate. Connect and confirm with a robust emergency communications solution. Visit alertmedia.com for more information. You've been listening to the Employee Safety Podcast. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to give a quick rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.